Hello, Chef, and welcome back to the Industry Standard, where it's my mission to teach you the strategies and tactics that will turbocharge your culinary career based on the hard lessons that I and the friends and chefs that I interview have learned over the last 30 years in the culinary industry. Today's interview is with Bradley Borchardt, and hopefully right now you're looking at a slideshow of him with some trophy animals, because he's a big game hunter. We talk a little bit about that. Bradley and I have known each other since 1999 when we worked together at a restaurant called The Tonic in Chelsea, just off of Union Square in New York City. We talk a lot about New York chefs from that era, and I think I speak authoritatively about them, but he knew them better and worked for way more of them than I ever did. So, Bradley has got a wealth of knowledge, a million things that he could pass on, and we only get to cover a few of them. But you can find more bonus content, more free content, more premium content at the-industrystandard.com, in addition to stuff you can find on Spotify. Also, don't forget that you can email me your mailbag questions. Send them to mailbag@the-industrystandard.com. I will answer your mailbag questions in future episodes, and that's another exclusive benefit for Industry Standard subscribers. So to everybody out there in industry land, stay humble, stay hungry.
Meanwhile, we're doing this.
Well, I know, but this is not for general audiences. This is specifically targeted to people who want to become chefs. So
heard that. No, I like it. We chef.
Okay.
Sorry, chef. Won't have it again, chef.
All right.
Let her rip.
Chef Bradley Borchardt, welcome to the Industry Standard.
How you doing, chef? Long time.
Yeah, no kidding. So tell us what your position is now, and what your title is, what you oversee, what your day-to-day is like.
Oh boy. So I work for Cargill, which is probably the biggest privately held company in North America and one of the biggest in the world. We deal with all manner of food ingredients: salt, chocolate, starches, sweeteners, all manner of proteins, eggs, beef, pork, chicken, turkey, and I do innovation work for the various segments that I work with for various segments of customers and disciplines. So convenience stores, food service distributors, non-commercial spaces, where we can position our products in those various spaces to make some money and then help the customers make money. And it's just at a scale that is unimaginable to the days of running restaurants or even hotels, or when I was multi-unit, running a lot of outlets. It's like you're talking about billions of pounds. And, the estimate is that in a given day, Cargill is feeding 1 billion people globally. One of my beef plants, Dodge City, which is sort of in Kansas, which is sort of the Cadillac of them all. We have a number of them, but on a normal day of business, they're feeding 5 million people in one day. It's kind of cool that I get to leverage back all that operational experience on something this level. It's very humbling, and the stakes are very high when I go into a presentation.
Yeah.
Meaning you really can't buy a glass of champagne for somebody and say, well, we screwed up. Will you take this glass of champagne and deal with our screw up?
Well, I brought some show and tell. So I want to start with this. I lost the dust jacket a long time ago, but you gave me this book back in 1999. The inscription says, "Brandon, best of luck with all you do. Stay focused, stay intense, stay open, stay humble." And so I always remembered that inscription as "Stay humble and stay hungry," which has become the tagline for the Industry Standard itself. But
right.
Nick Malgieri is one of those chefs that his name unfortunately may be lost to history and maybe lost to the generation that you and I are speaking to right now. So please tell us who Nick Malgieri is, why he's important, and also how he went about putting this book together.
Well, all right. So you're asking me to dig deep here. So I remember Nick Malgieri. So, I mean, when I moved to New York, I did some classes at Peter Kump's New York Cooking School, because even though I had cooked professionally, air quotes, for 3 years in Colorado, like I moved to New York to go head first into our current profession. Like, Colorado was great, but, I wanted to see, I wanted to go to the belly of the beast. So, he was one of the sort of chefs, I don't want to say emeritus, but like he had his own business, cookbooks, blah, 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 and did the teaching at Peter Kump's, which is one of the reasons they were able to get people in there to teach from a professional level and then just to show interest to prospective students. And and so I got to talk with him and do some events with him and taste his food. And it was great because up until that point, my neophyte career was, it was all about French desserts, creme brulee and souffle and which is all great. But Nick had a total Italian bent on it. And I started to, just have a little inkling of, a world that's so much larger than what you're doing in the kitchen that that you're working in. And so I found that really interesting. I gave you that book. I remember giving it to you. I mean, it was after we had spent time together, and we just hit it off as fellow philosophy students, and just sort of with a strange bent in the world. And those words were written from the heart, from the head, from the hands, which is how we approach things, and that they ring true for me. It's just the MO of how I would approach something nowadays, even though I have a tremendous fatigue and a bit of angst and a bit of like, the hell's it all for in my day to day, because I am middle aged now. I'm not a young buck, and so, or actually, I'm older than middle age. If I'm going to live to be 112, then I'd be middle aged. So yeah, it's just that's what that meant, and it's cool that you've kept that book, and I'll just continue on. This was one that I would give to people. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
This was given to me by Gesualdi, La Repertoire. This is the original copy for me, and it was I wrote it every day on the subway. Every day I was in New York.
Yeah.
I've given it much later in my career to people, and the cooks nowadays are just like, there's no pictures. Like, what's the point? And it's a sad story. So you can see how tattered it is.
Yeah.
I gave this, I know you remember me telling you about this guy, Gabriel. He was sort of my first hire for my first chef's job. A total punk rocker. He was, in a band called Falling Sickness out of Southern California, a true hardcore punk rock Mexican kid who would have no problem killing anybody and then just going back to work the grill station. But turned out to be just an incredible talent and somebody who was my friend for many years. And I was still his jefe up until the point that he died. But his girlfriend gave it back to me after he died, because I gave it to him basically with the same thing to Gabriel. Thanks for being part of my first crew. Stay focused and humble. Peace, Brad. So same sort of inscription.
Mm-hmm.
That's Gabriel.
Oh man.
And so yeah, a little bit teary eyed there. This came back to me, and Gesualdi gave it to me. But that's when I would give to people that if I truly saw them having a desire beyond posting something on Instagram, and sort of explain the necessity of something like that for a foundation. But I don't give them out too much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and for reference's sake, for all you young chefs out there in industry land, Chef Brad and I worked together at the Tonic in 1999. It was my externship from the CIA, and Chris Gesualdi was the chef there. It was a brand new, huge restaurant. Gesualdi had gotten 3 stars from the New York Times at Montrachet, farther downtown. And before that, he had been Thomas Keller's sous chef at Raquel before that. And so, Chef Bradley has kept in touch better than with him better than I have over the years. But yeah, Le Repertoire is something that I broke out again when we were, in the formative stages of building the menus at Bluebird, and I got it for the chef and the chef de cuisine here and the sous chef here. And it's just bottomless, man. There's it's just a gold mine. And it's unlike any other cookbook. So
yeah, I mean, certainly. And the fact that you have Sol Veronica on the menu is just, makes my heart pitter patter, chef.
Well, something else, I remember being an extern in that kitchen, surrounded by you and all these other guys who were moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and Stefan and David Honeysett and all these just, heavy hitters. And I remember asking a lot of stupid ass tenderfoot questions But one that I remember asking, most of them you would just shake your head at. But one that I asked, I said, what's the difference between David Ballou and David Boulay, or Daniel Ballou and David Boulay, and the guys that they were cooking on the line with, 15 or 20 years ago? How come they are where they are now and those other guys aren't? And you thought about that one for a minute. And your answer was, I think it's an acute awareness of their surroundings. So, in the interest of passing on some of this knowledge that you and I have gained to the next generation, what does that mean to you when you're in the kitchen on the line? Like, what are those? Is that just using all five senses, or is it anticipatory? What does that mean?
It's really being open and not being ahead of yourself and being in the moment. But as you know, being in the moment in the kitchen means being incredibly present in front of what you're doing, but then also thinking 5 days ahead at least, because you're going to have things curing. You're going to have long cooked sous vide items. You have a million things going in the future. But I think it's being very present and very open with what's happening. And there's so much osmosis that happens in a kitchen. You learn by standing next to somebody. You learn by being in the presence of somebody. There's a moment of, and it's funny because like in that New York time for me, I had two disciplines. Gesualdi, who is extremely technical. His bain marie sauces were very complex, and there was always two or three sauces to the plate. And when I first staged at Montrachet, I just was blown away by this tiny little kitchen having 8, 9 stock pots, everything from white chicken stock, brown chicken stock, venison, squab, duck, fish, lobster, all going in. It's like all distilled down into, and this is not only that kitchen, it was most of the kitchens in New York. But so he was this super technician. And then I worked for Scott Bryan, who was, what's his approach is it was almost musical because everything was done a la minute and there was no complexity to sauces. They were entirely focused on the protein you were cooking, but it was that protein out of the pan, add shallots, fresh thyme, deglaze with some sort of acid, then add a stock. And the stock usually was a formation of 3 different stocks. So if you're adding a venison stock, it was white chicken stock into brown chicken stock into roasted venison bones in the venison stock. And so then you'd add, some sort of sweet element like a port or a currant jelly or whatever to do a sauce Cumberland. And then you're building that and tasting and adjusting as you're cooking. And then you plate and serve. And Scott understood the great element of bain marie sauces. He worked for Partale, which is high volume at Gotham Bar and Grill, and you could not do cooking a la minute. But his whole thing was, dude, a sauce to cook a la minute that's where it sings. That's what he would always say, And so Veritas was 70 seats, set menu, not set, but like course menu, 3 courses that you would choose. And so at 70 seats, you'd be sometimes on your station making 5 or 6 of those pan sauces a la minute, which is hard.
Yeah. Well, and if I remember correctly, he was like, locally world famous back then for, hey, we make risotto. When the order comes in, we open the bag of risotto and start making the risotto. That's not par cooked. It's not anything.
Pretty much. So my point to this, as I digress, is I had the technical aspect of Chris Gesualdi, who not only was he sous chef at Raquel, La Reserve, and Raphael for Keller. And you spent more time with Keller than I did, but there's a technician there for sure. I mean, I didn't call it cooking when I saw it. I saw it as surgery. And then Scott Bryan, obviously worked for Grey Coons and Portale, but his time that really formed him was with David Boulay, who was that a la minute completely, as Scott Bryan said, he's not a cook, he's an artist. And so 2 very different approaches, both providing different experiences for the cook and the guests. None is better than the other. It's like, which band is the best? It's like, I think it fit the dining room for where you were working because of, it was a representation of the personality of the chef. So, those are 2 guys that came up under 2 of what I consider the greats of American cuisine. I would add Charlie Trotter to that as the 3 great ones that our country's produced: Keller, Boulay, and Trotter. As we've talked about, there's no mentorship on how to be a good person in the chef world. You'd be a great cook, but personality wise, it could be challenged. But like he could have easily done the whole restaurant empire, Wolfgang Puck or Thomas Keller. He was that skilled and had a following like that, but just wanted his one or two places in downtown. Did one cookbook because I think everybody browbeat him into it, but he could have done 20 of them like Charlie Trotter did. He just didn't care. He just had his, the times I would eat there, sometimes he'd just be sitting in the dining room eating in his own restaurant. And just, that was his world,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're a big game hunter. And when I say big game, you send me pictures of you with bison, you with, I don't even know what kind of hooved animal,
okay.
Something with, massive freaking 10, 12, 28 point rack, whatever. What
28 point.
What is it like when you're way, way downrange? There's not only no electricity, but there's no Wi-Fi, but I assume there's no noise pollution, no light pollution. What's going through your head when you're just out there, just nothing else? I mean, time can't mean much.
Again, I grew up hunting and fishing in the Midwest, and it was, when I was younger, I kind of wanted to be a fishing guide. Like that was what I aspired to. And really loved it. It was sacred time spent with my father, who I didn't have a great relationship with, but like when we would go hunting and fishing together, it was cherished. And we always, it's just like shore lunch, catching a bunch of walleye up in Minnesota, and then cooking that, like, and then started getting serious about my career. And then for well over 20 years, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day minimum, and then living in these mega cities. It's like on my day off in Tokyo, was I going to go out and try and hunt Sitka deer? I was just praying for death on Sunday and then having to get back up into it and Monday. And so, it just fell away from me. It was all part of me. I always would think about it. And I did wild game dinners. Like I, did a wild boar dinner in Tokyo once, Inoshishi it's called. It was extraordinary. And now 5-6 years back into it, I'm like fully vetted. And even though I work for a protein company, like I haven't bought protein in 6 years. Like my freezers are full of premium, wild, organic, really interesting product from all over. And so what I enjoy about it, and some hunts are way harder than others. Some are just not super difficult, but they're still fun and they still provide you with great experiences with friends and food for the freezer. But some of the more challenging ones I've been on, it is a question of completely getting out of yourself and your situation into environments that can be kind of sketchy. You're extremely fatigued, you're extremely hungry, you're beyond thirsty, and you're climbing up a mountain and you're like, what am I doing? But it sort of focuses you down to what you need. And at one point, how am I taking my next step? It's a challenge that is torturous and you willfully put yourself there, but I don't know, it's very, very gratifying to actually at that point, if you can get down and connect and kill an animal. What you have to go through to make that happen is a tremendous amount of effort. And then it all starts. You got to break it down in the field. You have to care for the meat. You got to pack it out. And many instances, I'm bringing home giant, like this elk that I got this year. The hindquarter had to weigh damn near 100 pounds, and I'm butchering that in my little kitchen at home. And after dragging it out, cooling it down, hanging it and treat, like the whole experience of it is gives you a sense of where your food comes from. And I've always known that food doesn't come in plastic bags, but it's like it's evident now that you can get everything delivered and there are meal kits and whatnot, that food is an abstraction like never before. Well, if I am going to be packing out hundreds of pounds of meat from 10 miles back country, whatever it is, and I'm now in the comfort of my home and I defrost that saddle or that shank or whatever, and I'm cooking it at home for my wife and oftentimes my dog. He loves wild game. The amount of focus that I have on that product because of how much effort I put into it is rekindled something in me, which it never really went away. But it's like, the career over a span is going to have peaks and valleys. It's going to have amazing times. It's going to have times of total drudgery. And the getting back into hunting has been, something that has just been amazing for my approach to food. It's reconnected me to things like this. I've done dishes that Escoffier did with wild game, birds especially. So that's really been awesome about it. I mean, this past hunt that I didn't get anything. It was my last hunt of the year. I drew a Barbary sheep, which is, I can tell you about the sheep. It's from North Africa, got brought into North America back around World War II, and is now a self-sustaining population of these crazy looking sheep in New Mexico and Western Texas. And they're as wild as can be. They are crazily adaptable animals that don't need to water every day. They just get their water from the sparse vegetations that's there. And I was in this area in southeast New Mexico that was one of the most vast landscapes you could ever. I can't put it into words at the feeling of being in a landscape that is so vast and intimidating and steep, rocky peaks, not like Rocky Mountain peaks, not like the San Juans, but a deceptively challenging landscape. And it was single degree temperature and 20 to 30-mile winds every day. And we were hiking at least 8 or 9 miles every day. And I got one shot off 450 yards uphill and missed because I was lying on a cactus to try and make the shot happen. It still was an incredible hunt because I didn't think I wasn't able to train the way that I wanted to before this because I had work, the holidays. And so the fact that I was able to get out there and hammer those many miles at my age and my decrepit physical self was worth the time that I spent hunting, even though I didn't get an animal.
Hey, let's talk about your time in Asia for a little bit. So it has always stuck with me, and I hope I get this right, that you opened the Oak Door Steakhouse at the Grand Hyatt Beijing
No,
on August 8th, 2008, opening day of the Summer Olympics.
close. I started in Tokyo at the Oak Door,
Okay.
which there's 3 postings that in Asia for chefs that were always the holy grail. 2 now, but it was initially 3. It was Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Usually you'd get some if you got to go overseas, some far flung
Outpost.
And then you would work your way up. I landed at the Zeitgeist. The Grand Hyatt Tokyo at that time was the #1 hotel in the Hyatt portfolio, and pre 2008, it was the epicenter of that mega city. I would cook for Bono one day, Bill Gates the next day, and Madonna the next day, and got to connect with mega people in areas that they were their barriers were down because they were in an environment that was foreign to them, despite how global any of those people would be. And so I understood that. Well, I'd never really run a hotel per se. And they asked me to go open the first luxury brand of their, the Hyatt portfolio in mainland China right before the Olympics. It was supposed to be open a year before the Olympics, but it was just fraught with tragedy, fires, floods, ceilings collapsing, horrible corruption. I ordered Sambonnet stainless for my shellfish platters and I got hubcaps, literally. Like everything was stolen. There was so much grifting going on. It was just so corrupt. They didn't settle the land that the building was on, so windows would shatter. Like it was just, and I'm in it at this point. I'm like, the pre-opening was so delayed that I wound up traveling all over China and studying in 2 different Chinese cooking schools and staging in a bunch of Chinese restaurants. And so awesome for an anthropologist, awesome for a chef wanting to learn, but also like kind of ridiculous that I had a year and a half where I really wasn't, I was, expanding myself, but really wasn't doing. I was at such a strong point in my career that, it's like I should be managing people, running, blah, blah, blah. And the hotel had $7 million worth of business booked for the Olympics. We were not ready to open. It was incomplete, 100%. but we opened anyways. And it was one of those moments that you look through and you're like, I'm really not going to get sussed about things having gone through what I just went through. And I talked about hunting, but that was willful. This was just
Yeah.
thrust upon me, and it was just like think I worked 60 days straight and a lot of 24-hour days to get that thing done. And it was just under, the intense pollution, and I had gone from this shining jewel of Tokyo, and where everything is pristine and everything is just at the highest level of everything. I don't care if it's, as I always say, the egg salad sandwich at 7-Eleven is a thing of utter and complete gastronomic beauty in Tokyo, and China was not that, especially 2008.
Well, so before that, you went, I think, west from New York City and worked for Mark Miller. And so he's one of those, I think, seminal American chefs that, because he wasn't a TV chef, an internet chef, those things is in danger of being, also lost to history. So what do you think that his legacy? I mean, I think y'all have remained in touch over the years. So what do you think his legacy should be, and what lessons should the next generations of chefs learn from Mark Miller?
Anybody who has met him or traveled with him will have, a couple of the same things to say. One, a genius. Two, the best palate of anybody you'll ever cook with. Three, a tornado in the kitchen, like a train wreck. Very less concerned about perfect mise en place than about the perfect flavor combination. And so, yeah, it was an amazing time. I had my first chef's job, in Portland, and that was like most first chef's jobs. You learn a lot. You're a little too arrogant. You crash and burn a bit, and
Yeah.
dust yourself off because you're young. But that was great. I learned a ton, and that's where I met Gabriel. And I actually brought him ultimately to the Coyote to be my chef de cuisine. So we got to work together there. But my time with Mark, I got connected with him through a colleague mentor of mine, and it was supposed to go down and just sort of help him get through the summer season, help him finish a cookbook, help him get the cantina open, which was the outdoor patio, and help him turn the basement into a Southwest diner. Supposed to do that in 3 months. And I wound up staying there for almost 2 years. And, here's a guy whose only time that he was working for somebody was with Alice Waters at Chez Panisse back in, when it was just starting in the early 70s. And he got his PhD in anthropology from Berkeley, and always said, yeah, I mean, he loved to travel in France and Italy and Spain like all of us, and was always just like, that's great, but there's just a world out there that is so much more than that. And so I just call him the patron saint of New World cuisines. Like he elevated and embraced anything south of the Rio Grande, which includes Cuba, and anything in Asia, from Indonesia up to Mongolia. He had traveled in China when it was just opening up and had amazing stories about what that was. And so here's a guy who has a palate that it's unimaginable how he would be able to coax flavors out of sauces, curries, ingredients, so on and so forth. And then this travel knowledge of approaching food from an anthropological standpoint, which was unmatched. And I, going to school for philosophy and anthropology, identified with it because it's all I wanted to do was travel and learn about cultures through food. And he has done it better than anybody else. And he's penned, I don't know, 15 cookbooks or something, and done 10 or 12 restaurants. And he could have easily been Wolfgang, if he had the right management behind him, because he is so crazy. But his deal was just like, I don't always want to be doing the next restaurant. Sometimes I want to go learn about 16th century cathedrals in Dijon, and not tell anybody about it and just go do that.
As you do.
Yeah. And it's just like, so what I got from him was, that, yeah, France and Italy are great. And he knew a tremendous amount about French and Italian food, tremendous about, but it was just like, that's not the only thing to focus on. And so from that point in time with him, my repertoire for understanding about chilies and starting to really delve into, Mexican cuisine is one of the most complex, bar none, one of the oldest, bar none. And it's just like it's so horribly misrepresented in this country, like most cuisines in the world. I think Rick Bayless does a great job, and there are a handful of places, but still, it's somewhat of a novelty, and it's somewhat of just, yeah, we're going for tacos, man, and this place does, cauliflower pakora tacos, and it's just like, yeah, you can do that. Nothing against it, but it's just like, what's wrong with trying to learn about tacos from where they came from? And so he really gave me the keys to approaching food at a level that I fantasized about, but I had no idea how I would implement. And from that point on with him, all the times we had traveled together and had crazy experiences, like it just gave me access and a sort of a perception about things that were very limited from my hardcore French European upbringing. Man, you got to get your hands dirty, and that's what he showed me how to do, and gave me the keys to, which was forever grateful.
Well, when you came back from Asia, I believe that's when you went to work as R&D chef for Pei Wei and PF Chang's.
Correct.
And is that so? And then that must have imparted a certain, some very different perspectives into restaurant work. So were there any lessons that you took away from that? You say, I wish I could, write a letter to my 24-year-old sous chef or chef de cuisine self, and whether there's shortcuts or strategies or anything like that that you gain as an R&D chef.
One, I came back from 6 years in Asia, and it was just the best of times. It was the worst of times. Like it was a lesson in extremes, and I was exhausted, just physically and emotionally exhausted after. I mean, I went to Thailand for 2 years after China, which was great, and I got to work with Bill Marinelli, and we did modern Western seafood restaurants to showcase his product, and then Bangkok fell into civil war, with the 6 different political factions, and there were RPGs going off over the Sky Train, and there's a machine gun nest 400 yards from our second. Like everything about living over there was so intense. So when I came home, I was like, I didn't want to run anything. Like I wanted to try and change what I was doing for my profession. So I got in the job with Chang's and Pei Wei doing R&D in their test kitchen. And like running the hotel in China, I was woefully misguided and not really trained for it. And when I was finishing there was when I should have been starting there.
Okay.
To do the job that I felt like I could have done. It worked out because I learned what I needed to learn. It got me out of the vicious cycle of running things. But I probably could have I know I could have done a much better job. But so many times you just get into it, and the desire and the drive, and I don't want to use the word passion. I do not like that word. To get up and go and deal with basically working 8 till 4:30, 5 days a week with weekends off, and not knowing anybody in Phoenix. Like I just moved here for the job. I still live here. So there was a bunch of things that were incredibly destabilizing from the routine that I had known for so many years. And, when you're doing R&D for a brand like that, I call it ideating through the eye of a needle. Is the products that you're going to use be able to be sourced for 500 restaurants? Will it be available? How distribution wise will that happen? Will it be able to be trained? Will the dish make it through all the stages of tastings that it has to go through oftentimes people that know nothing about food, that are just business people, that you can't serve them something with cilantro in it because they don't like cilantro. And then is that going to get onto the restaurant, sort of to see what a 3/4, to get an LTO out. Somebody takes half to 3/4 of a year. And you don't get that in day-to-day operations of traditional restaurants. You're really just much more knee-jerk. Season's coming, uh, fall vegetables, mushrooms, root vegetables. You kind of know what you're going to be playing with. You got to be thinking that far ahead. So it was a great experience, but I just was shooting from the hip and figuring it out day to day because I was just in this lifestyle of something that was completely foreign to me for my whole working career. I had a real hard time getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week, because I had gone to sleep at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning for so many years. Um, Weekends were almost depressing to me. Like I couldn't wait to get back to work. Not that work was so enthralling. It's just like I didn't know what to do with myself. And it sounds ridiculous, I know, but it's just when you put yourself constantly into situations that are new to try and continue whatever you want to continue to grow and do what you do. There's a lot of that is very uncomfortable to be in. And so it was a very challenging time to just and then I was just adjusting with moving back to the States. I'd been away for 6 years and then I come back and everybody looks like they're the spawn of a Yakuza and Duck Dynasty flower child. Like everyone had this giant beard and was tatted up the wazoo. And they're like, there was no aesthetic anymore. It was an aesthetic that I didn't understand. And they were approaching things from this, like, that didn't make sense for me. Like there was just an aesthetic about the food that still remains today that was much more conceptual than what I consider real.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up for this episode. There's a lot more stories that I want to hear about Japan. I also want everyone to hear the story about your experience at Arpege, and a lot more that I want to cover that I want you to pass down, because you and I have had conversations that I wish I had on tape that I would like to pass on. But thanks so much for your time today. It's been great to catch up.
Awesome, Chef. Great to see you.
All right, brother. Take care. Cheers. Bye. All right, Chef. Fun's over for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I truly hope that you got some value out of this episode. Remember, you can find more premium content and more free bonus content at the-industrystandard.com and on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Stay humble, stay hungry.